Okay, so originally I was just going to use this video to talk about Blood on the Tracks, which I just finished reading a few days ago at this point, and it's one of the best manga series I've ever read. But in that time, I actually binge read another series by the same mangaka, and that mangaka is Shūzō Oshimi, and that is The Flowers of Evil, which actually came earlier in his bibliography. So I thought I'd talk about both and talk about how I've kind of discovered one of my new favorite mangaka. Um, yeah, so the I've read short story slash one shots by Shuzo Oshimi before, because I had read some chapters of Blood on the Tracks. I think I got in the first volume at like a used bookstore years ago. So I'd read those and I had was familiar with the author. And I knew I wanted to continue the series one day. I just never got around to it. And in the interim, I read some like short story one offs. And those short stories, like one off one shots, were incredibly fetishistic. They were, is that the right word? They were very particular to exploring some of the author's sexual fantasies, clearly. And I don't know if I necessarily connected or resonated with any of those. I thought they were kind of little, I don't know, you know, I don't yuck people's yums. I'm never like that. But, like, I don't know, they didn't sit with me right, I will say. And I think going into these two, I think he's done more long form series, but these two long form series in particular, with more time and space to breathe, you could see him exploring those deep, like, I don't know, I don't like to call them deep dark secrets, but like deep seated, almost subconscious, like like fetishes or perversions in a much more like depth with much more depth and narrative like fulfillment around them, to where it's like, oh, this is an incredibly engrossing narrative that touches on those things. And I think Shuzo Oshimi in turn is a much stronger series writer from what I've read than short story writer. So I have not watched. I think Flowers of Evil has an anime adaptation. I don't think it's recommended. I'm just even looking at screenshots right now, and I'm like, this looks nothing like the artistic direction of the manga. So it's interesting. Anyway, I'm going to start with Blood on the Tracks, kind of, because that's kind of technically what I finished first. This was an incredible series, but it was also so incredibly disturbing. It's rare when I say a piece of media actually genuinely disturbs me to my core, and Blood on the Tracks absolutely did that. It was getting to the point where I'd read a chunk of chapters in a day, and I'd feel miserable during the day, and I'd be like nothing happened today. Why am I feeling so anxious and depressed and miserable? And I'm like, I read 10 chapters of Blood on the Tracks this morning. That's why. And to me, it gives you these negative, deep negative feelings, but the fact that it gives you them so strongly to the point where you're like, why am I feeling this way? Like, that's showing something about the power of the piece. Blood on the Tracks is one of the genuinely scariest things I've ever consumed, and it is not a horror. I would say it's a horror, I guess. It's not, there's no supernatural horror element to it. It is all something that can completely happen and probably does happen in our reality. There is nothing reality breaking out of it, other than episodes of like psychosis that happen to the characters, which, like, we see their perspective and their reality is completely warped, and what's actually happening is not what they're seeing. But that's very different than there being a supernatural element to it. And I think those sequences are handled sparsely and incredibly well. I will say, both series, The Flowers of Evil and Blood on the Tracks, handle their endings very differently. And I would compare it to like almost comparing, even though 5 centimeters per second and came first and Weathering with You came second, I would say like Blood on the Tracks came after, but it's the same ending feel of 5 centimeters per second, where it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and then it ends, you know? And that's how you're left, kind of. It has like this tinge of like, okay, maybe things did work out, but it's so much more bitter than sweet at the end that you're just like, God. And I will fully say that Blood on the Tracks is the better series. Blood on the Tracks is, I would call it a masterpiece. I think it's one of the best horror things ever made. Flowers of Evil has problems. The art is nowhere near as good, and the narrative is a lot rougher and more rushed. I mean, the pacing is nowhere near as tight. Like, Blood on the Tracks has some of the best pacing ever. I think the chapters go by so quickly and are so engrossing that you just keep reading, and you'll read like 10 chapters or 20 chapters in one go, you know, without even thinking. Blood on the Tracks is much like more lingering and slower paced, and like the like some of the characters, at least especially in the first half of the series, are a bit more annoying. I wouldn't say any of the characters are annoying in Blood on the Tracks. In Flowers of Evil, I mean, I don't know if I'm saying the wrong names. I'm sorry if I am. Flowers of Evil, some of the characters are a bit annoying, especially in the first half. I think in Blood on the Tracks, none of the characters are annoying. They're horrifying, and I think that's a key difference. But I would say, though Blood on the Tracks is the technical better series, I would say for sure, I think Flowers of Evil I like a little more because of its second half and because of it ending. It shows that you can have a very dark past and still have a good future. Now, there is something in it at the end of Flowers of Evil, and I'm actually going to, without spoiling them, I'm going to pull up the chapter, the final, I think it's second to last chapter, myself. There's actually, the final chapter of Flowers of Evil is actually incredibly interesting, because it shows essentially the whole first half of the series again from another character's perspective, and I thought that was incredibly well done. To me, it's like a side piece. It's not really the final chapter of the story, you know. To me, it's more like a compliment. The story's over, but to see the pretty much like the whole first half of the story from another character's perspective and show what they saw, incredibly powerful way to leave the story. So I actually really like that the author did that. But the second to last chapter, which I would say is really the final chapter, chapter 56, I think, I'm pulling it up now, as I talk, it did something that I want to look at again, because I, in my head, as I'm talking about this ending, don't count that part. But if that part is narratively what was most intended, I would say it's kind of rough. But I don't think it was. So, okay, let me go back to it. Wow, the scan I was reading on Manga Pen is such a much better scan than I don't think so. I don't think. Let me look up something quickly. Sorry to like totally interrupt the video. Like interpreting the final chapter. No, yeah. Okay. I was worried that it would be something that it wasn't, and it's not. Someone did a fucking funny meme at the end, like a dumbass meme at the end of this scan. But yeah, the scan was much clearer than the one I read, so I'm glad I read it on my phone and not computer, which is very rare to say something. But yeah, so The Flowers of Evil has an ending that resonates with me a lot, like personally a lot more, in that it shows that even with a very dark past in which maybe a lot of the darkness is something that you participated in and actively caused, that there's still hope for a good future, while Blood on the Tracks kind of does the opposite, where it's like someone that is broken in an early part of their life remains broken to the very end, and they do this kind of bittersweet ending where they show like, hey, maybe he found peace, but I think peace with the situation is very different than happiness. I think Flowers of Evil, the characters end with happiness, while in Blood on the Tracks, the like, not really, like, I guess last character standing, you could say, ends with peace, coming to terms and peace with the situation, but not happiness and not moral high ground. And I think that's a very important distinction. But I would say, like, I highly recommend both these series. I would say Blood on the Tracks is better. I would say Flowers of Evil I like a little bit more, just because of personal things it does for my taste and resonance. But I will say like this mangaka is incredible. I would say like I said, I think he's a much stronger series writer than he is a short story writer. But I think other than the first volumes, I think I read the first volumes for both of these years ago. I binged the entire both series in a matter of like a week, like both within like 1 week, pretty much, like maybe a week and a half. And Blood on the Tracks was, albeit they are very brisk short chapters with not a lot of dialogue. I mean, Flowers of Evil is 57 chapters, and which is a fairly short series in serialized manga terms. Let's see how many chapters Blood on the Tracks was. It was significantly longer. And I know we're all used to, like, One Piece, you know, length for things, but 153 chapters is not something to, you know, like, is worth noting. That's a long series. But yeah, maybe I'll come back when I finish reading the rest of his bibliography and talk about it a bit more. Like talk about my thoughts on the author overall. But Shūzō Oshimi, like, it's really interesting because he is definitely, you would see through both of these series in different ways, he is definitely processing his own trauma, his own mental illness, and his own life experiences, and his own, I guess, sexual issues. Like, I don't know what the right word is. And I think he is definitely processing them through his art, and that's clear. He does a good job of not explicitly saying in his art, because like Shinkai, for example, you know exactly what happened to him in his life and how he's handling that through art. You can totally read, watching his films, like, this is the life experience you can't get over, and you're trying to process through your art. While Oshimi does a very good job of sort of like creating these enthralling. Do you hear that? Is that picking up on the mics? Someone's blasting music driving by. But yeah, Oshimi does like a good job of like, I can't concretely say what happened to him that he's trying to process through his art. You know, it's much more abstract, and I really find that interesting. There's a lot to interpret here. I feel like I could go back and reread these series and get different ideas and different interpretations. I don't like I think there's series that you can come back to and read multiple times to get better interpretations. I could probably read Flowers of Evil over and over again just because I know the ending is, you know, more positive and happy and hopeful. I don't think I could go, at least for a few years, don't think I can go through Blood on the Tracks again because it's fucking disturbing. Like I said, it like totally changed my mood for days. Like, it is really really disturbing, and I would warn you, both are disturbing, but Flowers of Evil transforms into something with happiness, while Blood on the Tracks, like, it will leave you with a disturbed feeling in your gut, and it's a terrifying series. I wouldn't say Flowers of Evil is terrifying. I would say Blood on the Tracks is terrifying. And if that interests you, the idea of a horror series that has no supernatural element whatsoever that could fully happen in our modern day reality, and probably does, and is one of the most terrifying things I've ever read, I'd highly recommend Blood on the Tracks. But just be prepared to be disturbed. And Flowers of Evil, Evil, Evil has a really, the first half is tough to get through, has a lot of cringe, but like intentional cringe, in that the characters are behaving cringy, and that's what the like they're like that's the point of the narrative. It's not like, oh, this is a cringy story, the point is to show that they are like they should punish them for being cringy, essentially. And it's frustrating, and the characters are frustrating, but like it goes to a place of hopefulness. So overall, I loved both of these series, and they both get high recommendations for me. I would say, like I said, Blood on the Tracks is the stronger piece, but Flowers of Evil is the one I preferred a little bit more. So, yeah, think about some more. If you read one or both of these series, let me know. I tried to give like as few spoilers as possible, because I think it's one of those series that like you can't really say anything about the narrative without giving anything away. So I just tried to say nothing about the narrative, really. So let me know if you read one or both of these, and let me know. I'd love to know your thoughts. I'd love to discuss, so let me know in the comments below. So yeah, thanks guys for watching / listening.